Hi everybody. Okay, so we are going to walk through just creating a general report template. So I left click on reports to take me to the report perspective, and I click on this little plus sign to create a new one. I'm going to call it template report for today and make sure I select the conservation area reports. So then I left click save, and here it is open. So the main things I'm going to be working with is the report items and this outline and toggling between reports and outline here. The first thing I'm going to do is click on my canvas, and then there's this master page option here. So if I click on this, I'm going to change the general orientation from auto to portrait and from type USA letter to A4. So that's just changing the format of the general structure. This could be your monthly report as an example. I'm going to left click on layout again to take me back to where I can create the structure. But to be aware here, next to the name of the report, there's this little star. That little star indicates that something has changed within this report design that has not been saved. So if I see that and I want to make my changes permanent, make sure that you save your changes to implement it. So I left click on save, and you'll see that star has disappeared. The first thing I'm going to do is create a grid. So this grid just creates the structure. So if I left click and look, if I drag my mouse, there's a little plus sign next to my cursor on the canvas. I left click and it brings in the grid. So I'm going to have 3 columns and 1 row. I left click OK, and there it is there. In the body, you'll see these things appear, and if you want to click on it, it'll select that option. When you select that option, the properties become available for that specific element. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to change the font to Arial, and I'm going to leave it like that. And then so that everything that comes in here is going to change to Arial. And then I'm going to change the border from width thin to all. If I left click on the side, you'll see there that it's now all black, and the grid, you'll see now what happens. So I click save to make sure my changes are implemented. Now I'm going to add 2 more grids. So there's going to be my logo, my title, and my logo. I'm going to add another grid at the bottom as a 1 by 1. So I'm going to have a table that comes in there. I can do the same thing with a border. It just makes it look a bit nicer. And then the same thing here, I'm going to add another 1 by 1, and that's going to be my map. So the first thing I'm going to do is add the text title. So I find the text option here, and I drag it in. Now you see this little cursor is inside that cell. So that's telling me that that text is going to be inside that cell. And I'm just going to give it a name. Now immediately it changes to Arial. And then, for example, what I can do here is select grid, which is the whole thing. You see there's text, which is that element there. So I'm going to select that cell, and I'm going to change the general orientation. So to center, to bold, and I'm going to make it 18. So that's whatever text gets added in the future, it'll carry into that cell, it'll carry those changes. So I'm going to add a logo on the left. So I'm going to click on image, and I'm going to do the same thing. There's my little icon is on the outside, and now it's on the inside of that cell. So I'm going to upload an image. Let's just go to this one. Insert. There it is there. So you can see its orientation to the left. So I'm going to click on that cell, and I'm going to make sure that it's in the middle. Click save. Now I want to add a summary query. So a table showing information here. So on the dataset side, I right click and say new dataset. Now new dataset will allow me to go and look for information. Query attachments is anything from an observation that has like a picture that you can add, you want to add it there. Tables is extra information from like employees. I'm going to go look at queries because I've created some queries before that I want to represent. So here I'm going to go and choose this weapons and gear summary and click finish. Now, I know that this is the station and this is the type. It comes in as header 1 and header 2. If I double click, I can change that. So that is station, and make sure it's exactly the same. So the alias and display name is the same. I can double click on header 1 as well, and that's type. Makes it easier later on when I'm bringing it in. So I click OK, and there it is there. All I have to do to represent this, I just drag and drop it somewhere here. So I'm gonna, oh wait a second. So what I'm gonna do first is change this grid. I'm gonna change the font size to Arial. Okay. Now, if I drag this in, it changes all the font and saves me time, and it adds and changes it to Arial. There it is there. So what I can do is click the top left. I'm going to change the border to thin, so it creates black lines in between each column. I'm going to select this row, so this row here. I'm going to change the background to silver, bold, because that's the title of the specific column. And then I look here inside, I can double click and I can edit this title. Now these curly brackets allow me to, it says that I can actually edit this. It's just free text. It's not influencing the dynamic data coming in. These square brackets are the ones that you don't want to mess with, because that's the dynamic information coming in from the different queries. So I don't mess around with that. I can just change that and it won't affect the information. So here's type. So I just change that to type, and I just, there's station, so I just change that to station. Click save. Now what I'd normally do from this point, I want to have a look at what it looks like. So I click on reports. There's my template report, and I say run. So I'm going to choose the date range for last quarter and say continue. So now there's my table just to have a look at what it looks like. Obviously there's no divide here for some reason, so I'm going to go change that. But this doesn't look nice, so I'm going to remove this column. So if I left click on there, I select the outline at the left hand side. Here's my grid. I'm going to look at select my table because that's what I want. This column here, I select and I right click and say delete. So I don't need it anymore. I just want to select this grid to make sure that the border is everything. That's fine. Yeah, we'll leave it like that. Okay. So now I'm going to add a map here. So if I go down the report items, I say smart map, and I pull it into this block below. Now I draw this bigger so that it's a bit easier to read and represent it on the report. But now I need information to be represented here because summary queries can't. So I right click on data sets and I say new data set. And now I'm looking for queries where it's an observation. So there's my observation query there. Click finish. This is just telling me the different columns that are coming in. Click OK. There it is there. So I select my map, and then there's properties. Sorry. There's the properties, and I change it to map layers. So the first thing I'm going to do is just choose my base map, and then I'm going to add that. So any query that has a point or geometry feature will be available to you here. That's why naming is so important. So I click OK, because that's the one I want to represent. I can change the style, but I'm not going to do it now. Make sure I save my changes so that when I run this report, it's going to come through. So there's my report. I'm going to run it on the last quarter. Now it looks like nothing's happened, but here next to this little pie chart here represents the report that's been run. This is the icon that means it's being edited. So if I click there, there's my table that's got that column missing now, which is great. And then right at the bottom here is my map. So this is just a general, quick way to create a report, monthly report, for example. I would recommend using grids to help structure what it looks like. I like to change the formatting on those grids so that it makes it easier for whatever you add in here. And just to show you what it looks like, if I add another grid below, one by one, right? The default here is if I add the summary to it, you'll see that the text there, the font is actually serif, which is the default. But because I changed it there initially for the specific grid, it made it easier for me to just drag it in. So I don't want this grid anymore. So here's the table and here's the grid that is. So I just right click on it here and I just say delete. It's gone. So it's, yeah. So use grids. It makes life a lot easier and faster. And I hope that's helped.